Nostalgia. It's one of the best feelings you can have. It's when you can reminisce and look back at all the great moments in your life and what's helped shape you to what you are today. But at the same time, it does make you feel old at the same time. And I think both of us are feeling that a little bit here with this challenge. But on today's show, we're taking a trip down memory lane. In honor of hitting 100 subscribers on the channel last week, we asked you guys to give us some suggestions for today's show. And we got about 6 to 7 submissions. So I put all of those into a poll over on Instagram. And with 67% of the vote, you guys see it. Today we're building a team with our all-time favorite NFL players. Should be tons of fun. Of course, I'm joined by my co-host, Bakari Steve. How you feeling on this Tuesday morning?
I feel great. I'm ready to roll. I'm ready to show off my all-time team.
No, absolutely. But this is your early reminder that if you guys do enjoy what you're seeing / hearing, go ahead and support us down below. Like, comment, subscribe. We have our socials on the screen. Go ahead and follow those. You guys have been asking about that. New content on all of those every single week. So go ahead and support us if you do have the chance. But without further ado, I'm your host, Owen Stiftar. Some quick news to get into first, but then we're going to get into the dream teams, I guess, in a literal sense.
Yeah.
But the fan-led mock draft, just some quick news I wanted to throw out there for you guys. We released a podcast on this channel, our first one, a couple weeks back. And, there were some questions about some of the picks that we did make over on TikTok and YouTube. But it's your guys' turn now. You guys criticized. Now it's time to get criticized, maybe, right? From April 23rd to the 26th of this month. Yeah, it's a little bit of ways, but I'm giving you guys some time to prep for it, right? I'm going to be releasing polls on every single draft pick over on social media. I'm not, we might have 8 of the first draft picks over on Instagram, the other 8 on TikTok. You got to be following all the socials to keep up with the draft. But majority vote wins. I'm going to put a couple options for each pick, majority vote, and we're going to be putting together a full first round of an NFL mock draft, but the fan edition.
Yeah, I think it's a good idea because we did have some questions after the first one we did, and like we said before, it was a little janky the way we did it because it was like a snake style draft, but we weren't necessarily sitting in person to do it. But I think it'll be fun to see what you guys come up with for each of the picks.
Yeah, we're gonna have I think we're gonna have 2 more mock drafts here on this channel. One in about 2 weeks or so, and then we might have one right before the actual draft, maybe on that Thursday that it does start. But follow us on all of our socials if you haven't already, as new content there, right? The new CBA. This is the biggest thing we're going to talk about today, or at least in the news section. But on this past Saturday, the NBA and its players agreed to a new CBA, right? A new collective bargaining agreement. And the deal, I'm just going to read off some of the things that is in this deal. And stop me if you want to talk about something.
Yeah.
The deal ensures that we're not going to have a lockout season until at least 2029. We're going to have an in-season tournament that now includes the top 8 teams in the league who are going to be playing in a single elimination tournament at a neutral site. And every player on the winning team of that in-season tournament gets $500,000.
I do want to talk about that one. That one is interesting to me because I felt like with the addition of the play-in, that's what kept teams pretty competitive. Through the season, with an incentive obviously at the end of the season if you're a top 10 team or a seed at least through 10, right, you get a shot at the playoffs. The mid-season tournament, however, it doesn't really make sense to me because you might have a little bit of slack even now, I guess, in the middle of the season. But for the most part, ever since the play-in, the season is a lot more competitive through game 1 to through game 82. So, we'll have to see how this mid-season tournament plays out, actually during a season. But I'm not a fan of what it sounds like it's going to be.
Yeah, unless you're dealing with the Iron Men of the league like Giannis and Jokic. I can't imagine LeBron's going to suit up for a meaningless $500,000, which is a lot of money for an average person, but for the top stars in the league that are making $250, $300 million contracts, they're not going to risk injury for a meaningless tournament here.
Yeah.
But it's more money for the league, and I don't know. I guess a lot of us weren't necessarily fans of the play-in at the beginning, and it grew on us. Maybe if we get our top stars in here, maybe it changes things, but it does also raise the question of, since they're taking, I did some research, and the teams that qualify for this tournament every year are only going to be playing 80 regular season games. because they're going to be competing in this tournament. So how's that going to affect the record books? Are players going to even want to play in it because it affects the record books and their contracts, incentives, all that good stuff? I don't know.
Yeah, I don't know. It just sounded weird to me. I like I said, I like the idea of a play-in a little bit more than this. I don't know if I'm still the biggest fan of the play-in. I guess it still has to grow on me. But, I definitely, when you put it in comparison to a mid-season tournament, it just sounds like the play-in is a lot better idea because there is an incentive to make the playoffs, which every team, that's what their goal, every non-rebuilding team, that's what their goal is. I guess my thing is if you're going to have a mid-season tournament, then take the play-in out. I feel like it's just with these two options, it's one or the other. Because I don't know, I just feel like it's a one or the other type of choice to me.
Absolutely. NBA teams are not going to get $17.5 more million to spend into the luxury tax, which is interesting when it comes to keeping your star players and keeping those teams together. That for people that want their money. But for award voting, this is the most interesting thing to me: is players need to play at least 65 games to be eligible. And then for the All NBA teams that we're going to talk about on this Thursday, they're now going to be positionless rather than featuring the 2 guards, 2 forwards in the center as tradition states, right?
Yeah, that one is really interesting. I seen somebody comment on one of the NBA posts when this first came out, like, oh, so you have to play at least 65 games. So in other words, they don't want their players to be healthy. And I just kind of laughed at it because I'm like, if you're missing 17 games, if you have to miss more than 17 games during the season. For non-major injury related reasons, then I don't know. That just seems kind of crazy because it's 17 games is a lot of games to miss during a season if you want to win an award. So
especially the MVP, which we're going to talk about Thursday.
Yeah,
we're sticking to the old rules, I believe.
Yeah,
where it's just what we've known for however many years basketball's been around. And we'll get into that Thursday, right? But players won't be tested for marijuana use anymore. That's good to see. Players can now invest into WNBA and NBA teams as well as companies that's dealing with sports betting specifically. So that's key. That's a key thing to note there. The one and done rule for college is still intact, despite the rumors that it was going to be, uplifted back to where it was when 18-year-olds can go straight to the league. That's good to see. I think the one and done rule, especially with the G League now, it's great that they have that year just to prep their body or prep their mental, and sometimes you're not as ready as you think for the top level basketball.
Yeah, I mean we've seen guys like Jaden Hardy and Jalen Green go to the G League and who are number one pretty much in the nation or projected to be top 3 picks in their draft. Yeah, Jalen Green was the second pick, but Jaden Hardy, he did fall, and it was because they went to the G League and were able to get that experience and development and see where they were at in their game and make strides in that. But yeah, I think that's interesting, along with the fact that now there isn't a restriction on how many rookie max contract extensions you can have on your team. I know this is huge for like a team like the Cavs who have Darius Garland on a rookie contract, on a rookie max extension. I'm sorry, Donovan Mitchell is still on his rookie max, and we're going to have to pay Evan Mobley soon. Originally, it was only you can have 2 guys, so now, for younger teams, they can pay their guys.
In the fine details, the salary cap will increase by no more than 10% every league year in order to repeat the 32% increase in 2016, which that was the year Timofey Mozgov and Luol Deng got $84 million deals. Can't see that again, right? But good for them for getting their bag. And then one of the last things I wanted to note is the time a team has to match an offer sheet in the moratorium period of free agency in the NBA. For a restricted free agent, the time to match a deal will be reduced from 48 hours to 24 hours. So I guess that, it just puts teams on a bit more of a time crunch when these players that are getting deals. The first thing that always comes to mind is that Zach LaVine, how he got that bag from, Sacramento?
Yeah.
And Chicago matched it at the very last minute. So now Chicago, in that scenario, they would have had a whole day less to make that decision. And sometimes that might increase the panic levels when making decisions, right?
Right.
But the last thing here we're going to move over is to Andrew Wiggins. For personal reasons, he's expected to be back early this week. Could be any day now, right? And, there's a lot of stuff, a lot of rumors about what was going on with Andrew Wiggins, but I guess it's well, I will say this. It's huge for the Warriors, I think. And he's been working out every day from what we've heard, and he's still in game shape. So I think it's a huge for the Warriors. I mean, do you think this can maybe change their season around? I mean, is a Warriors team with Wiggins and without Wiggins change your outlook for them on where they can go?
It's kind of hard for me to say because obviously Wiggins boosts what we should expect from the Warriors. Some of their struggles on defense, a little bit more consistency on offense. But at the same time, the Warriors were still having their road troubles when they had Wiggins. They still had, some of the other problems when they had Andrew Wiggins. So for me, I don't know if this changes my opinion from playoff team to, championship winner. But I think it does add, maybe instead of losing in the first round, they might get to, the conference finals or something like that. I do think Andrew Wiggins adds that to this Warriors team, obviously. But, I guess the best thing we have to do is just kind of wait and see how he comes back. With it being so close to the playoffs, too, that's my only other concern. He hasn't played in, 22 games, I believe. So we'll have to see how he's going to fit back. Clay did miss 2 whole seasons, so that's different. But Clay did miss time, and he didn't really even get back to himself, pretty much that whole last year. So we'll have to see how Wiggins, his mind is, I can assume his mind has been far away from basketball these last 22 games. So we'll have to see.
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely going to take him some time to get acclimated back into playing. And there's no way you can be in on-court shape, off the court, right? Not playing in regulated games. But shout out to Wiggins for finally getting back on the court. Hopefully he's in a better place than he was when he took this leave.
Yeah.
And hopefully he's back to being Wiggins. I mean, this Warriors team's going to have to play perfect from here on out to win on their last dance.
Yeah.
Moving over to the lineups, we're about 12 minutes in, so, not too bad, but I want to preface this before we get into this. So when you guys said our favorite NFL players of all time, we took that as a combination of nostalgia and players that we just generally love to watch. These are not going to be the best players of all time, not the best players at their position, maybe in their primes, right? But these are just our favorite players to watch. Someone we turned on Sunday and they're always making a spectacular play, or we were just like, man, we just love how he plays the game, right?
Yeah.
But moving over, quarterbacks. And I also want to say this is not a competition. This is not a competition between our teams. We didn't draft these teams, so we might have some of the same players, but that just means that they're a very likable player, right?
Yeah.
Now moving over to the teams. Go ahead and kick us off with your quarterback. Quarterback is one of the most exciting positions, the most important position on a football team. Who's going to be leading your hypothetical dream team?
My dream team captain, number 1, is Cameron Newton. Cam Newton, he did wonders for me when I was younger watching football. Nobody can forget that 2016 season he had. Fell just short of winning the Super Bowl that year. But Cam Newton, he just had that swag. He just had that impact on fans. Super Cam, dabbing when he got to the end zone. He was quite literally a freight train out there. Cam Newton, he's the impact he just had on me just watching the game as a fan. It's crazy. I did consider guys like RG3 or even Mike Vick. Even though I didn't watch Mike Vick until obviously he was a little bit older, but Cam Newton, he just the way he was able to captivate younger me was crazy.
Yeah, Gator, first off, I'm a big Gators fan. Before he transferred to Auburn and then proved that at the time, I think he was the greatest college football player I've ever watched. And then he comes into the league with all the expectations, being the number 1 pick, going to a terrible franchise at the time, and he turned it around. He turned it around. He was one of the most electrifying players. Cam Newton was my number 2. But my number 1 was Drew Brees. Drew Brees, for me, being an undersized quarterback at the position, the prototype 6'3", 6'4", big body, strong arm quarterback that you see in the Josh Allens and all the prototypical guys that come out the drafts, Will Levis. But Drew Brees was an undersized quarterback, and he still got the job done. It doesn't matter if his linemen were 6'5", 6'6". He was undersized, and he still was one of the most smartest yet effective quarterbacks of all time. I think he has the most 5,000 passing yard seasons in NFL history. He held that record, and he would have still held that record for most passing yards of all time if Tom Brady didn't play 32 and a half seasons. Drew Brees is amazing, undersized guy, like I said. He's a Super Bowl champion, my favorite player of all time. And those Saints teams were fun. I mean,
Yeah.
we're going to get into it a little bit later with some of his weapons that he had, but I was a big fan of those Saints teams growing up.
Yeah.
But moving over to the running backs, I'm just going to read mine off. I have Adrian Peterson, AP all day. Adrian Peterson's arguably, in my opinion, the best running back of all time. Might sound crazy, but just off of pure ability, might be the best of all time. Steven Jackson, throwback name of the day. That dude, I mean, if you want to watch a powerhouse, just physical running back that wants to run through your face, that was Steven Jackson. I mean, you got a pretty good one as well. We're going to get to in a sec. But Steven Jackson was just, man, he was one of those guys, like, it was him and Michael Turner back in those early 2010s that they were on terrible teams, but they were just running through people. They were carrying their teams. And Steven Jackson was just one of those guys I'll never forget. And then one of the new age guys, I tried to throw these in as much as I could, was Nick Chubb. Nick Chubb, he's the Kawhi Leonard of the league. He doesn't talk, he doesn't celebrate, no drip at all on the field. He's just, I'm showing up to work and I'm going to get the job done. And he does that at an elite level.
Yeah.
He's the only person that could challenge Derrick Henry for best back in the league.
Yeah, and I have two running backs, and my first one is DeMarco Murray. DeMarco Murray, I think I knew who he was, obviously, when he was in his prime, but I think when I really, really recognized him was on a Thanksgiving. I can't remember. It might have been like 2015 Thanksgiving Day game. Can't remember who they were playing, but DeMarco Murray.
Most likely the Lions.
It might have been. It might have been because DeMarco Murray and Lance Dunbar ran wild that game. I think they both had 100 rushing yards each. They were going crazy. That's the only reason I remember Lance Dunbar in every Madden that Lance Dunbar was in from that day forward. I would put him up to a 99 just because the only time I saw him on the field, he was the second best player on the field. And then my second running back on my list is Marshawn Lynch.
Shout out Skittles.
Yeah, Marshawn. I mean, beast mode. I was a heavy Seahawks fan back from like 2013 to basically like 2016, 2017. Obviously, we'll see some of my some of the players I have later on. But Marshawn Lynch, he was the anchor of that. Him and Russell Wilson, they were the anchor of that. Of why I like the Seahawks so much. He's just a physical contact back. They should have gave him the ball in the Super Bowl. But I'm not going to say anything more.
Would have been a 2-time Super Bowl champ for sure. Moving over to the wide receiver room, and this is what I'm talking about when it makes you feel old, and this makes me sad a little bit, man, because there's a lot of these great players that, I mean, aside from Jamar Chase here, which we'll get into, none of these players are basically in the league anymore.
Yeah.
And it's just sad to think that these guys were at one point at the top of the game. But for me, I have Brandon Marshall, receiver for the Bears. I mean, he played everywhere. He played with Miami, the Bears, Denver. He played for the Jets late in his career, which arguably, that might have been his best football with the Jets. But for me specifically, as a Bears fan, as a secondary Bears fan, Brandon Marshall, those teams with Jay Cutler and Greg Olsen and Matt Forte, and those fun teams with Johnny Knox, or not Johnny Knox, it was Johnny Knox.
Yeah.
And not to mention a guy that we're going to get to later, my favorite player of all time, or second favorite player. He's an elite returner, we'll say that. But I think you guys can all imagine that team was just very fun offensively and defensively. And if it wasn't for Jay Cutler getting a little cut on his finger, this Bears team would have been in the Super Bowl against the Steelers that year. But then I also have Roddy White. You have his pairing mate.
Yeah.
We'll get into it in a sec. But Roddy White, man, he was one of those guys that was underrated, played the game. He was super underrated. He was super just quiet and to the point. He was a never in-your-face guy. Roddy White was super underrated. I think in his 7 seasons that he played, he had like 67 touchdowns.
Yeah, something crazy.
In 7 seasons. And that's insane. It's almost 10 a year. That's unheard of, especially back then when it wasn't as pass happy. Marquise Colston, a guy on those Saints teams that paired with Drew Brees, that connection was it's burned into my memory, right? Of Drew Brees, especially later in his career when he was throwing shorter passes and Marquise Colston was breaking 2, 3, 4 tackles, going all the way and making a big play out of it. He's just a super big body receiver, can win those 50-50 balls. Marquise Colston's amazing. And then just a surprising one here. I thought about Antonio Brown. I thought about Calvin. But for me, watching the games nowadays, Jamar Chase is, to me, the most exciting receiver in football, as he's the best route runner, or one of the best route runners, and he just pairs with Joe Burrow perfectly. He's going to make that team very dangerous for years to come. And even though he's only 2 years in, Jamar Chase is one of the most exciting players for me to ever watch.
Yeah, that chemistry he has with Joe Burrow is it's just insane. I want to preface my list by saying I there are a lot of people I left off on my list. At least I feel like it. A lot of names came to mind, whether that was Victor Cruz, Devin Funchess, who came Newton's target. Even Ted Ginn Jr. There are a lot of names that I thought of. Jacoby Jones, even though he was more
Jones, wow.
Yeah. I mean, it was Michael Crabtree, like you said before the show. There are a lot of names that I thought about here, but I'm leading off my list with Julio Jones. Julio, I want to say Julio, he was my favorite receiver. Probably, I want to say, I can't even remember. I know Roddy White was still on the team, and Julio, I just loved Julio. He was a big physical receiver, fast. He did everything.
Yeah, everything.
He was catching over. I mean, I'll never forget the game he had. What was it?
Because the Patriots, when he had that sideline catch.
Yeah, the sideline catch versus the Patriots. I've seen a lot of crazy catches, but that catch, it had the Falcons won, everybody would be talking about how crazy of a catch that it was, because it was. I mean, I think there were like 3 people covering him. The ball, it didn't even look like he was going to get there, and he sideline catches it 2 toes down. Then I move on to Dez Bryant. Dez Bryant is just one of those guys. It's like I didn't know that I liked Dez Bryant that much, but once he tore his Achilles and he was out of the league, I was like, man, like I kind of miss Dez Bryant. Obviously, y'all know was it a catch or was it not a catch?
Was it a catch?
Yeah. Dez Bryant is just one of those guys that I always just was like rooting for. Percy Harvin is another guy. We have his Seahawks colors here, or I do. I picked him because I remember one of the only things I remember from the Super Bowl when they played the Broncos was his kickoff return versus them in that blowout. But he was a dog for the
shout out the Gators. That's another Gator. Also played for those Minnesota teams with Sidney Rice, who is the name that just popped up to my mind, and Brett Favre with AP there.
Yeah,
Percy Harvin, amazing talent.
Yeah, he was insane. And then I have Doug Baldwin as my 4th receiver.
It was Allen Iverson out there.
Yeah, like I said, my team is full of just Seahawks players. And Doug Baldwin, I don't know what it was about that team, but everybody on that team I just have a vivid memory of. I'm mad. We were talking before the show. I'm mad I left some of the people off on my defense who played on that team. But, man, they were crazy.
Yeah, I guess it's a good time to say that I started watching football. I want to say... Well, first off, I was born in 03, and I want to say I probably started watching football that I can remember probably from 08 right on. And obviously, I've done my research in the past, but 08, I think I've watched football, and I think the first Super Bowl I remember is probably that 2011 Super Bowl with, of course, Drew Brees taking down Peyton Manning. I would assume around the same time for you, that 08 to 2010 range.
Yeah, I want to say 2010 because I do remember the that Saints Super Bowl, but I vividly remember the 2012 Super Bowl. Lights went out at halftime. 49ers versus Baltimore. I was a huge Cat fan that day. I remember I sneaked and watched it because I was supposed to go to bed, and I was like, I'm not going to bed. But yeah, that's from that point on. That's where all my memories flood in.
Absolutely. Moving over to the tight end spot. These are the big bodies, the guys that you need a bailout. These are your guys to go to. Again, I'm going back to those electrifying Saints offenses where Drew Brees was throwing for 45 to 50 touchdowns a year, 5,000 yards, and his biggest target throughout that time was Jimmy Graham. Jimmy Graham was a guy who in fantasy, when I sucked at fantasy football as a youngin', Jimmy Graham was one of those guys I used to always take, and he would keep me afloat, right? He would give me those 4 to 5 wins I would have a year when I first started playing. Because it was just him and Drew Brees, man. It was just those 2 guys carrying my team. Jimmy Graham was one of those guys who, I guess, I don't want to say he was a blueprint for the tight ends we see nowadays with Gronk and Travis Kelce and George Kittle in them. But Jimmy Graham was one of those first tight ends that stepped out to the boundary, and he was able to beat a corner off the line and go and make those amazing plays, right? Especially down in the goal line. Yeah. It sucks that he did go to Green Bay late in his career, and he was a shadow of himself, if I can talk.
Yeah.
But Jimmy Graham, he was an amazing player when he was with the Saints, and that's what I know him best for. My other tight end, I thought about Travis Kelce, and if I was making the list now, I would have Travis Kelce here, as Travis Kelce is another one of those fantasy players for me that I used to always take, even when he didn't have Pat Mahomes, when he had Alex Smith, and even before Alex Smith. But Travis Kelce, he would be my close third. But I went with Kyle Pitts, another Gator for me. My bias is showing, but Kyle Pitts, he is a receiver in a tight end's body. You can't say enough about him. He had one of the best combines in NFL history. Was amazing. player in his senior year at Florida. He made Kyle Trask look like a decent quarterback, and that alone, and even at the college level, is amazing. Kyle Pitts, Kadarius Toney, that team was a fun Gators team, but Kyle Pitts was really that guy, and I just hope that Desmond Ridder can be the quarterback that the Falcons need, so Kyle Pitts can can have more production going forward.
Yeah, my two tight ends, before I get into them, I don't know why, but when I first looked at the tight ends and I was like, oh yeah, or who am I going to have? Kellen Winslow Jr. was a name that came to mind. So when I say I started watching football probably seriously 2010, and then from that point on, I was still playing. Like I was still playing Madden. Like the first Madden I think I played was 03. Then I moved to 05 and 05 all the way up. So a lot of these players too were fond Madden memories. So if I saw him in real life, I'm like, that guy, he's good. And so, yeah, Kellen Winslow Jr., that's why he came up to mind. My first tight end on my list is Antonio Gates. Antonio Gates was one of those guys. He was on the Chargers with Phillip Rivers, and it was just like, I don't know. Antonio Gates, maybe, because I will say this. I did play tight end when I was in, like, little leagues and up through middle school before I switched to slot. And I used to love guys like Antonio Gates. I like Grunt, but I didn't really like him because I was around a time where I didn't like Tom Brady either. And obviously Travis Kelce and Tony Gonzalez and guys like that. But Antonio Gates, he's number one. And followed by Vernon Davis. Like I said, first Super Bowl memory I have that I really remember, like almost play for play, is that 2012 49ers Super Bowl. VD. VD was just one of those guys. He throwing the ball. He can
Kyle Pitts
run.
Before Kyle Pitts.
Yeah, VD. He was him and Antonio Gates. They just ingrained in my mind when I was young, trying to figure out what type of player I wanted to be.
I mean, I think Antonio Gates is the sole reason Phillip Rivers is a Hall of Fame quarterback. And that's not to disrespect Rivers. When you have a talent like Antonio Gates, not to mention the other pieces they had, like LT and Vincent Jackson for all those years, but Antonio Gates is the reason Phillip Rivers is probably going to be a Hall of Fame quarterback with no Super Bowl rings. But moving over to the defense, as we just closed off the offense, my D-line here, we went with just 4 defensive linemen. You could have went with different schemes and all that, but we just 4 defensive linemen. And I went with Julius Peppers, Vince Wilfork, Aaron Donald, and Myles Garrett. Julius Peppers, for me, got to be my favorite defensive lineman of all time. He just, for those Bears teams, he was past his prime with those Bears teams, right? But, I mean, even with those Bears teams with him, Brian Urlacher, another linebacker we're going to talk about later, as well as a corner, look, those early 2010s Bears teams were super fun, and I'm going to say it again. Yeah. If it wasn't for B.J. Raji landing on Jay Cutler, the Bears would have been in the Super Bowl, and they would have beat that Pittsburgh team with Big Ben and all them. But Julius Peppers, I mean, he's 6'3", 6'4". He can move like a linebacker, sideline to sideline. Super dangerous, and I wouldn't even try running a read option on him. He's going to get to either the quarterback or the running back if you try and test him. But Julius Peppers, amazing player. He's super nostalgic for me, to say the least. But my big guys up front, we have Vince Wilfork and Aaron Donald. You want to talk about talk about a guy that just took up 3 or 4 holes. That's Vince Wilfork, man. Yeah. Vince Wilfork was the guy that he took 2 offensive linemen with him on any play. He was super huge for those Patriots teams, and super nostalgic, right? Aaron Donald, arguably the best defensive player of all time. I said it. But, he's the only guy that can challenge Lawrence Taylor at the moment for that mark of defensive player or best defensive player of all time. And he's doing it. I mean, he was with those terrible Rams teams for years. It's turned around a little bit in the later half of his career. We don't know if he's going to play next year, if he's going to retire, what's going on with Aaron Donald. But any other season we could get out of him, it's going to be amazing to see because he moves like no other, especially because he's undersized. And then Myles Garrett for the Browns, he's a newer player, right? And I will say Myles Garrett's also probably the most frustrating player of all time for me. Just because Myles Garrett, I think because us as Browns fans, we know the talent that he is. Yeah. And sometimes it just feels like he disappears on the football field, especially in bigger moments, right? But Myles Garrett, he is, but when he does get those, I'll put it this way, because I can't talk, right? When he has those games every year where it's those 2 or 3 games where he has the 3 sacks or the 3.5 sacks and he dominates, Myles Garrett's super fun to watch. It's just he's also one of the most frustrating.
He'll go a game where he's like, or you're like, is Myles Garrett out there? Or you take certain plays off, and you're like, Myles, you should definitely be out there, but. That's what we don't want to push him away as Browns fans. We're going to take what we can get.
Oh, so. Absolutely.
Yeah. Leading off my list, I have Julius Peppers as well. All the reasons you mentioned, except I do have him with the Panthers. It's just Julius Peppers, watching him in real life, and then also playing Madden.
Yes.
It was just one of those guys. It's like, man,
it's a nightmare.
Nostalgia. Yeah. My second defensive lineman is Ndamukong Suh. You're
building an MMA team.
Yeah. My dad. He's actually from Flint, Michigan. So he was a Lions fan growing up all his life. He actually made he happened to make the Lions versus the Browns a household rivalry in my house. Even though I go everywhere, I'm like, yeah, you're ready for this Lions-Browns game? And everybody be like, what? And it's just one of those things inside our house. But, Ndamukong Suh, obviously he was dominant. He did recently play for those Bucks teams, and you might forget
Eagles this year.
Yeah, and Eagles, but you might kind of forget how dominant he was, or how good he was in that Lions uniform. Crazy good. J.J. Watt is just one of those guys. It's like, man, you kind of wish he didn't miss those 3 seasons with season-long injuries. But when he was on the field, especially in his Texans days, he was just such a monster, such a force out there.
3-time defensive player.
Yeah, sometimes you watch him, you'd be like, man, I don't know if with the exception of Aaron Donald now, like we say, but J.J. Watt was a force. And then I have Von Miller. Von Miller, what can I say? He ruined Cam Newton's Super Bowl. He was the sole reason Cam Newton does not have a ring right now. I don't think, especially that Super Bowl, obviously there might be some, but me right now looking into my memory banks, I don't know if I've seen a player go as crazy as Von Miller did that Super Bowl. I mean, it was like, you don't even remember who was on offense. You just remember Von Miller about that Super Bowl. So
Super Bowl MVP.
Yeah, that's my defensive lineman right there.
Moving over to the linebackers, you're going to notice something really quick about my linebackers. They're big, they're physical, and they're going to knock your head off, right? We're starting here for my favorite defensive player of all time, Brian Urlacher. Off the field, not my worry. On the field is where I fell in love with Brian Urlacher. He was 8-time All-Pro, or 8-time Pro Bowler, 4-time All-Pro, if my memory serves me right. I think he was also the 2005 Defensive Player of the Year, which he should have got one more. It's kind of a crime he didn't. But he was the catalyst to all those great Bears defenses in the late 2000s and even the mid-2000s when he went to the Super Bowl against the Colts there. And if it wasn't for Rex Grossman being the quarterback, that Bears team might have a Super Bowl to their name. But Brian Urlacher, he was the catalyst to all those great Bears teams. He was with that team for so many years. And it's just a guy that I fell in love with growing up, especially as a secondary Bears fan. And he's just one of those guys that I'm not going to say which part of my life, but let's just say his name exactly plays a part in a lot of my everyday things, right? The password of my phone, right? If you type it in, it's Urlacher, right? It's something that it's just as a kid to now, it's amazing to see how far he's come, right? Or how great his career was. And he's one of those players, like you mentioned, with some people, some prior players that you don't really notice how much you like a player until he's retired.
Yeah.
And that just hit me hard with Brian Urlacher, right? And another running mate of his was Lance Briggs. He was he was that outside linebacker with Brian Urlacher there on those Bears teams. And he's just another tough physical linebacker that's going to knock your head off if you come over the middle. Great tackling linebackers there. But arguably one of the best linebackers of the 2000s decade, or even maybe the first half of the 2010s decade, Patrick Willis. He retired way too early. Him and Navarro Bowman were killing it there for those Niners teams for years and years. He would have had a Super Bowl if it wasn't for the lights going out, right? Or maybe
them fixing a game.
Right. For Ray Lewis's farewell tour there. But Patrick Willis, one of the best linebackers of all time. All 3 of my linebackers, tackling machines, and they're big and physical. They like to hit.
Yeah, leading off my linebacker list is none other than Luke Kuechly. Like I said, my Panthers and Seahawks fandom is going to be, past fandom is going to be running deep on these lists. Luke Kuechly, he's just one of those guys. He read the offense like a book. He stayed in the film room, and the result was definitely showing on the field. Huge tackler, and the thing is, he get picks, and he could run once he got those picks. So
one of the most intelligent.
Yeah, for sure. Another guy who retired too early, but you just understand for guys like that. They obviously they value their life more than football, like any other person should. So nothing but respect. And then my second linebacker is Thomas Davis. Another guy I vividly remember in the Super Bowl, not just the Super Bowl, but just on those Panthers teams. Obviously by that point he was a little bit older, maybe a little bit past his prime, but he was still the force. Just a force out there. And then finally, I have Khalil Mack. Khalil Mack, that first season he was with the Bears was crazy. It was just one of those. He was just one of those players at that point in time. You're like, man, like he's going to get to the quarterback at least once or twice every game. Like it was just crazy how insane of a season that was. He definitely had a chip on his shoulder after being traded from the Raiders. But I remember at the time I was like, I don't know why the Raiders trade Khalil Mack. But yeah, that was crazy. I also wanted to put guys like Bobby Wagner on this list.
Yeah.
Navarro Bowman, for whatever reason, just came to mind. There were a lot of guys, like every position group, but there are a lot of guys, especially for like linebackers and receivers, that I was just like, man, I don't know how I'm going to leave them off. But
moving over to corners, you see some of the similar answers here, right? Or at least a similar answer, and that is the former Gator, the former national champion. That is Joe Haden. Longtime corner for the Cleveland Browns, and that's where we have him as. It was a devastating day when we let him go because it came out of shock.
Yeah.
It was no talk about it, and it was just, boom. Cleveland Browns released Joe Haden. To make matters worse, 2 days later, he signed with the Pittsburgh Steelers.
Yeah.
But Joe Haden, when he was with the Browns, he was, he's on those terrible Browns teams, right? But he was one of the lone bright spots that we had for many, many years, as well as Joe Thomas. And he was just a fan favorite. I mean, like, I welcomed him to come back this year or even last year whenever his contracts were up. I would have loved to see Joe Haden back in the Browns uni.
Yeah, we both have Joe Haden here. He's just one of those, like you said, he's one of those players where, even though the Browns we were watching were sucky, you just knew who Joe Haden was. You knew who Joe Thomas was. You knew who Josh Gordon was. You just knew who certain guys were, because they were obviously better than the rest of the talent we had on the field. So, watching him growing up, it definitely just nostalgia hits. And then I only have one other corner on this list. There are a lot of different people I thought about, like Richard Sherman and other guys like that. You have Pat Pete. I was thinking about Pat Pete.
Yep.
But I have Jalen Ramsey. Jalen Ramsey is just one of those guys. Like, I don't know. Trash talking type of guys, especially like Jalen Ramsey was when he first came into the league, and he was, he backed it up though. He backed it up. He was lockdown corner, shut down. But I don't know. It kind of hits different for me because I'm like, either I like trash talkers or I hate them really bad. Like Dylan Brooks is an example in NBA. I used to hate Draymond. Now I'm like, Draymond compared to like a guy like Dylan Brooks is a lot better in my opinion. But Jalen Ramsey, he did just that. He came in the league. He was arrogant. He was cocky, and he was on the field backing it up, locking down the other team's best receiver. Jalen Ramsey, especially when the Jaguars, I fell in love with AFC Championship game with Blake Bortles. That team was, that crazy year they had with, I don't know, I fell in love with J-Ram.
Yeah, Jalen Ramsey, even from his rookie year when they went to that AFC title game, and he was the captain of that defense, right? I mean, it was Saxonville. I mean, it was one of the most talented defenses, and if it wasn't for a mishap late in that game against the Patriots on that field goal attempt, not the Raiders, but the Jaguars would have been to the Super Bowl. We would have had a Blake Bortles, Nick Foles Super Bowl. I can't imagine, right? I can't imagine that, and I think the NFL felt that too. And they might have put it in for Tom Brady to win that game. But Patrick Peterson, for me, like you mentioned, maybe it's because, like another guy that I'm going to mention later, he returned kicks. He was very electrifying. He could make a play happen whenever. He was a ball hawk. Even as a rookie, right? Patrick Peterson played the return game, he played the corner game, and just like Ramsey, he's not on Ramsey's level, I don't think, all time. But Patrick Peterson could still lock down your favorite corner, and for me, he was one of my favorite corners of all time. Charles Tillman, Peanut Punch. He's the guy that they still talk about to this day because of his ability to force fumbles at the cornerback position and just punch the ball loose, right? They called him the Peanut Punch for a reason. He was on those great Bears teams, and he's a reason. And that's a big reason why he's burned into my memory. But then Antonio Cromartie, whether if it was his time with the Chargers when he had that 109-yard kickoff return or field goal return rather, or I have him more so for the Jets here because that's more so when I got to watch him play live, right?
Yeah.
And maybe it's his name. At the end of the day, maybe it's the fact that he has 13 kids. not that would play a part in why he's my favorite, right? But he just, for some reason, was in my head when making this list, and I was like, man, that's an amazing player, amazing talent, and it was hard to not at least mention his name on this podcast. But those are the corners, man. Shout out Joe Hayden, right? Moving over to my safeties. My first name. I can't imagine. I can't believe if you ask me any other year, I don't know if this name makes the list. But T.J. Ward, he's one of those players that I missed because of nostalgia. I think he's retired, and that it inflated his level of play in my head, right? But T.J. Ward, when he was with the Browns, he was a young, up-and-coming safety. He was a hard hitter, right? He was the next coming of Brian Dawkins, right? But then he went to the Broncos. We saw a way more polished version where he was, rushing off the edge. He was a bit better in coverage. He helped that team go and win a Super Bowl. And T.J. Ward, just when you watched him, maybe it's because he played for the Browns, but he was one of my favorite safeties of all time. And then moving over to the captain of the Legion of Boom defense, Earl Thomas. I mean, he was there for years and years after Cam Chancellor left, after Sherman left. After that defense piece by piece fell apart, Earl Thomas was the one constant that Seahawks team always had until the very end of his career. But Earl Thomas, one of the best corner safety or coverage safeties of all time, right? When we think about it, and he was undersized for his first position, but he didn't play like it.
Yeah, no, he definitely played bigger than what was he, like 5'9", 5'10"?
Yeah,
out there. Yeah, he definitely played bigger than that. His first year with the Ravens always comes to mind with me too. Obviously the Seahawks, but. Yeah, the two guys I have are almost purely off of nostalgia. I don't know. I was just thinking about safeties, and I was like, you know what? I'm going to put these two guys here. Maybe more so because I feel like they don't, you don't hear about them as much anymore. But Eric Berry is just one of those guys. I don't know. I don't know what it was about Eric Berry. He was, to me, he was elite. I don't know why. Maybe it was because I was playing too much Madden when I was.
He was elite. He was elite
when I was out there. Eric Berry, he just, I don't know. I just feel like I never hear his name come up when you hear about safeties. Cam Chancellor, we all know, was part of the Legion of Boom. He retired a little bit earlier too due to the head concussion injuries, but he was a hard, heavy hitter. Everybody on that Seahawks defense was I don't know. I feel like everybody was like elite at some point,
right?
Because it felt like that. But
they all came together
Earl
at the same
Thomas,
time.
Yeah. Richard Sherman, Bobby Wagner, that team was crazy. Cam Chancellor. I feel like I never hear his name anymore.
Mm-hmm.
Same with Earl Thomas, ever since he retired, even though he had that stuff going on at the end of his career. But, yeah.
Like I said, on the field we're talking about. We're not talking about off the field with certain comments maybe my quarterback or middle linebacker have made off the field, Urlacher and Drew Brees. But we're talking about on the field here. We're talking about on the field and what we know from them as a player. Not as a person, but a player. But moving over, just to recap our teams. Very quickly, I'm going to just leave my team up here so you guys can look at it for a second. We have an amazing receiving core, great running backs, great tight ends, and we did add an offensive line, if you guys were wondering. But, we didn't want to go position by position because, let's be real, a lot of people don't care about offensive linemen. We won't say that for this podcast, but, a lot of people don't care about individual offensive linemen. They just care about the group. That's why I went with the Browns offensive linemen. The year we made the playoffs after missing it for years and years, that team was just very fun. And then also, my head coach, I have Sean McVay. Sean McVay or Sean Payton are two of my favorite coaches of all time. And I went with McVay just because he's a little bit more modern. And I just love, even those years where it was just Jared Goff. It was amazing to me how, even though Goff was the first pick, I don't think anybody's really looked at him like the level of potential of like a Cam Newton or someone else that came out with the first pick. And I think that you took a Jared Goff, Brandon Cooks, and who else was on that team? Like a young Cooper Kupp, who was a fourth-string receiver, Todd Gurley. Yeah. It's just the way he's been able to bring these teams that don't have much talent to Super Bowl caliber level. It's very respectable, right? And he's a player coach. He's younger. He gets our players. That's why he's my coach. And then I also have the Chargers powder blue jerseys here for my offense.
Yeah, for my offense, I have I have Andy Reid as my head coach. You can see my offense out there. I also have the 2015 Cowboys offensive line. Don't know why. That was the first line that came up to me, and I was like, well, that's the one that's making it on my list.
Can't go wrong any of those years.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, Cowboys, for years, they just had a line, and you're like, man, like, how do these guys not fall off? But yeah, Andy Reid is my head coach. There are a few other people I was thinking about, like Sean Payton, but Andy Reid ended up making it, not only obviously for his brilliance with the Chiefs, but even the Eagles. Is just one of those guys. It's like, I don't know. Andy Reid had to be my head coach. And then I have the 2012 Vikings jerseys. I don't know. When I think of these jerseys, I think of Percy Harvin. I think of Adrian Peterson. I think of those guys. Even Brett Favre comes to mind with those jerseys.
Sidney Rice.
Yeah. I mean, those jerseys, they're just ingrained in my memory. No clue why, but that's my jersey right there.
It's killing me right now. I can't remember the tight end on their team. Number 87.
Yeah.
For the Vikings. I'm not going to sit here and think about this on the podcast, but I just, for some reason, I can't think of his name, and it's getting at me right now. Yeah. But moving over to the defensive side, for my kick returner, my second favorite player of all time, I have Devin Hester. Devin Hester, one of the most electrifying players ever. I was going to put him at the receiver position, but I figured why not show some love to some other people, and that's what Devin Hester did best anyway, was return kicks, all-time leader in touchdowns from punt and kick returns. Combined, right? I think Cordero Patterson has passed the kick return mark, but Devin Hester holds the record for the total amount, right? And it's a shame to me that he's not a first ballot Hall of Famer, but he should get in next year. Hopefully. I think it's a shame that he hasn't yet. He's legit changed the game for years and years, right? He's changed how the game has been played, how coverages are put out there for kick returns, and enough respect. You can't talk about him enough, right? But kicker, we both have Justin Tucker. Automatic. It sucks as a Browns fan because Justin Tucker's kicking it.
Yeah.
Doesn't matter if it's from over 50, 60, 70 yards. That ball is going in straight down the middle, picture perfect. It's like a Madden game.
Was it like that 2020 game versus the Ravens where Lamar went out to use the bat with cramps, and then he comes back in, throws it down the field. Justin Tucker calls game, and I was devastated after that game. And I'm a Lamar fan. I don't know.
And it's one of those players where it's like you want to hate him. Like, to me, it's like I wanted to hate Tom Brady for so many years. I wanted to hate the Patriots for so many years. But you're just setting yourself up for disappointment at that point because they're so great and that it's just no matter how much you want to hate on them or try and diminish what they've done, they're just going to keep proving you wrong.
Yeah, like after that 2017 Super Bowl was when I finally realized, I was like, I can't hate Tom Brady. I just can't do it because I wanted him to lose so bad that the fear that man had inside of me when they were up, when the Falcons were up, before there was even a remote, people were like, oh yeah, the Patriots aren't coming back from this. I was still petrified. And I don't know, I just remember how scared I was of Tom Brady.
I mean, just to your point, that same Super Bowl, I have a memory in my phone that I put out on social media. I said, if anybody were to come back from this, it's Tom Brady, and they're going to do it. And it's still probably the most iconic thing in my camera. But the rest of my defense, you guys see it, great D-line, hard-hitting linebackers, versatile safeties and corners. Great defense. I mean, great defense. It's a lot of great names up here. Makes me, it brings a smile on my face to see these names, but also makes me sad at the same time to think that only 2 of these players are still active to this point. Actually, 3 of them with Patrick Peterson, but same. I mean, a lot of great names our generation of players have moved on. I guess we're on to the new generation.
Yeah. On my defense, you can see I only have 3 active players. 3 active players. J.J. Watt just retired. That would have been my 4th. But my returner is Josh Cribbs. Josh Cribbs is another one of those guys on those Browns teams. He was just, you don't remember him playing receiver too much, but you remember him returning the punts and in the kickoffs. Just another one of those players that was exciting to watch. Like you said, we both have Justin Tucker. I actually thought about I was going to put Adam Vinatieri. I was going to put Matt Prater. Then I just set up for Justin Tucker. I'm like, you know what? It's got to be Justin Tucker.
It's too great.
Yeah, I was like, it can be none other than Justin Tucker. Fun fact about Josh Cribbs, I remember, I think I was leaving Mickey Mouse, Chuck E. Cheese when I was younger, and I was in the car, and or I was walking to the car, and me, my aunt, and my siblings were walking back to the car, and none other than Josh Cribbs was behind us. We didn't know, and then my aunt turned around and was like, "Is that Josh Cribbs?" And then she was like, "Hi, Josh Cribbs," and he said he was really nice, said hi to all of us, wished us a good day. It was crazy, just ingrained in my memory, just meeting Josh Cribbs randomly in the Chuck E. Cheese parking lot.
That's insane. I didn't know that till now.
Yeah.
I guess the only player I think on my list that I've ever met was Joe Hayden at a celebrity baseball game. Shout out to my dad for getting his signature. But besides from that, I haven't met any of these players. I didn't know that about Josh Cribbs. That's one of the story you'll tell generations and generations.
Yeah, it's just one of those. It's just like whenever I hear Josh Cribbs, I think of that story. Obviously, I don't hear Josh Cribbs as much as like a Devin Hester, but Josh Cribbs, Browns are great.
Absolutely. But that is going to do it for today's show. Again, this wasn't a competition. We're not sitting here drafting players and trying to see who has a better team. It was more so just nostalgia. And hopefully this met your guys' expectations as far as what you guys wanted to see for the show. I mean, we had 6 or 7 options, and this was the one option that stood out among the rest, was building our favorite teams. And I thank you guys for that because, we got to revisit our past here on this episode. But any last thoughts before we get out of here? I know we have a lot of, exciting episode here on Thursday, and especially next week as the playoffs are coming up. But any last thoughts before we get out of here?
Not really. Like you said, we do have a exciting episode coming up on Thursday. Mainly just NBA awards next week. Who we think is going to, win a playoff in the first round. So that'll be exciting. This episode was by far one of my favorites. Just sitting here thinking about old players that we used to either watch or that just come to mind. It was a lot of fun putting them down. So yeah.
Absolutely. Thursday. NBA award prediction show. If you guys are still here, drop a like, subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. But Thursday, NBA awards predictions. We're going to go through all the main awards, the all-NBA teams, all defensive teams, all that good stuff. Maybe even have our own personalized award we give out every year. We'll have to figure that out. But it's also the 50th episode of this podcast on Thursday. Big episode. We have a big show. Should be a huge turnout. Hopefully you guys enjoy. But until Thursday, stay happy, stay healthy. Let us know who you guys' favorite players are down below. And we'll see you guys Thursday.